couple more spectaculars. Spartacus, starring Kirk Douglas, coming out in 1960. Exodus, the story of the founding of Israel, starring Paul Newman, coming out in 1960. Another very famous, highly publicized film, Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. They became a romantic item in a big story. She'd been married 4 or 5 or 6 times. And they got married and got divorced and got married again. Another big budget, spectacular, lots of extras, lots of fabulous scenes and amazing sets and boats and battles and all kinds of things to get people to go to the movies. And not spectaculars, but some charming musicals aiming at a family audience. These are 2 I remember seeing as a kid growing up. Sound of Music, based on a book originally by the Von Trapp family, a real family who had been in Austria and settled in Vermont, and had a ski chalet there, a hotel that they operated. Then became a Broadway play, a musical called The Sound of Music, and then made into a very successful musical movie, 1965, the musical genre. Another of the musical genre with the same leading actress, Julie Andrews. This one by Walt Disney, based on a series of books about a character, magical nanny named Mary Poppins, another big hit in 1964 from the musical genre. And in the 60s, things did start to change in Hollywood in terms of the tone of many of the films being made. Younger directors and actors and producers, a new generation was coming in at this point who had grown up in the 50s. And we already talked about Little Big Man, which was very positive in terms of how it depicted indigenous Americans. This is reflecting a younger attitude, a fresher attitude. There were films based on the popular music of the day. Hard Day's Night was an independent production that came out in 1964, starring the Beatles, reflecting musical trends. Black and white. The director was Richard Lester. It was a big hit, and it remains a classic, very highly regarded even to this day. A couple of other 60s youth-oriented, youth-produced films. Bonnie and Clyde, based on real-life bank robbers in the Depression. This one coming out in 1967, starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. Lots of violence in this one, lots of gunshots. So here we see lots of, at the end of the movie, there's just a grisly scene where these 2 heroes are machine gunned to death in a car. A sophisticated, charming, funny film based on a book called The Graduate, came out in 1967, directed by Mike Nichols, a very young man at the time. He had made his name as part of a comedy team called Nichols and May. Very sophisticated, funny, male-female comedy team, which he made up with Elaine May. And the first movie he directed was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, from Cleopatra, in which they each do a fabulous job acting in a movie version of a stage play by Edward Albee. And that was wonderfully received, and before too long he gets to direct The Graduate, starring Dustin Hoffman, who we're looking at barefoot, and the leg of Anne Bancroft. Wonderful film with music by Simon and Garfunkel, including the hit Mrs. Robinson. And this one really just took the wave of what was going on with youth. A disaffected young college graduate comes home to his parents in California, and just takes a wry look at the world and adulthood. and it's just a wonderful film, big hit. Easy Rider was an independent film that came out in 1969, directed by Dennis Hopper, um, and starring him and Peter Fonda, and actually Jack Nicholson um, as well. Became a real Nicholson went on to be one of the star actors of the 70s and 80s, 90s, etc. In fact, he played Joker in the original Batman, um, directed by Tim Burton. But Easy Rider was about two free spirits on their motorcycles traveling across the country, and there's a scene where they smoke some weed with Jack Nicholson, and it was produced for not a lot of money, and was very successful, very influential, independent film for the youth audience. By the way, Henry Fonda, you see on the right there, is the son of the guy in the middle. Excuse me. Um, Peter Fonda, the guy on the right, that's Peter Fonda. He's the guy in the left-hand motorcycle, but here he is as a little kid with his father, Henry Fonda, who was a major Hollywood star, one of the studio stars of the 30s and 40s and 50s. And Peter Fonda's sister is Jane Fonda, who's on the left there. You may know her from a lot of different things. Multi-generational Hollywood family. Bridget Fonda is the daughter of Peter Fonda. You may know has been in some films also. Another youth-oriented film, a few years later, Animal House, produced by the National Lampoon. We talked about the National Lampoon magazine in the magazine class. This made well over $300 million, was the highest grossing comedy to that date, and that's John Belushi's cartoon there. It looks like they got actually someone from Mad Magazine, my favorite, to do that illustration. John Belushi's first starring role in the movies. What else can we say about the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s? I think it's really, in addition to a time of lots of special effects, it's a time where the directors are the stars. And I think we have to say Steven Spielberg, the guy in the middle with that US 69 cap, is the lead pony here, so to speak. He has had more hit movies that he's directed, I think, than anyone in the movie business, in the history of the movie business. From Jaws, which was one of the very first real blockbuster, multi-$100 million making movies, to E.T., which he didn't direct, but he conceived of. Don't think he directed E.T. I may be wrong. Maybe he did. Trying to do this all from memory. And you folks know Jurassic Park more recently. I mean, we can all go on and on. War of the Worlds. He just keeps batting 1,000. All the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies. Now, the guy on the right there is Mr. Star Wars, George Lucas. He and Steven Spielberg knew each other as young men when they were just getting started in the business. In fact, the story goes that George Lucas visited the Close Encounters of the Third Kind set. Steven Spielberg directed that film, Close Encounters. And they agreed to exchange points in each one's movie. So Steven Spielberg got 2.5 points, 2.5% of the gross of the first Star Wars film, because George Lucas was in the midst of directing the first Star Wars film. George Lucas got 2.5% of Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters, and George Lucas thought he got the worst of the deal, but he didn't. Star Wars, as I think we all know, was an amazingly big hit. In the 70s, Steven Spielberg made at least $40 million on his points, on his share of the profits. Spike Lee, success after success in terms of the movies he's been producing for decades now. You've got Ridley Scott on the bottom there, directed Alien, directed The Gladiator. What's behind him there is, oh God, it was remade. You poor professor's struggling. He's got the new one that's just come out, by the way, with Matt Damon and everybody, which is The Last Duel, has just come out. So Ridley Scott, amazing director, and we know him as a director, and we go see his films, and that's the point. The director is star. James Cameron on the upper left directed the original Terminator. Directed, I think, one of the Alien franchise movies. Directed Titanic. Directed. What was the last one? He was such a fabulous hit. You guys, I know you guys are just saying it right now, but your poor professor, whose memory is challenged. The one that takes place on the other planet. Avatar that came out in 2009. Anyway, we go to these directors' films. Here's some other famous directors in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Woody Allen is infamous now, but he's had many hit films. He won Oscar Best Picture of the Year for Annie Hall, and he's come out with film after film. They usually don't make a lot of money, but they're well regarded, and of course he's been embroiled in scandal. He's been accused of sexually abusing his adopted daughter, Dylan. You've got Francis Ford Coppola right above him with a huge beard. He directed all the Godfather movies. The first two Godfathers, absolutely brilliant films. The crazy-looking dude next to the camera in the middle is Stanley Kubrick, another famous director whose movies we go to. 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon. And then Martin Scorsese, winning an Oscar for Lord knows what. Also a director whose films we go to because the director is a star. So whether it's Raging Bull or Goodfellas for Martin Scorsese, right? Here are the highest grossing films of all time. Okay, Avengers Endgame, 2019, almost $3 billion. This is box office revenues. It doesn't include licensing fees or anything else. Avatar, Titanic, you can see those two, both directed by James Cameron, Avatar and Titanic. Then you've got all the Star Wars movies. The Avengers, more Steven Spielberg, Jurassic Park, more Marvel. Then those Furious Sevens, more Marvel. Black Panther did wonderfully. Then one of the Harry Potter's films did great. Another Star Wars, another Steven Spielberg. Frozen, a Disney animated film. Beauty and the Beast, Disney animated film. Incredibles, another Fast and Furious, another Marvel. So there we go with the box office receipts. Top 20 of all time, worldwide box office. I'm going to stop here, and then we'll talk about the business.